My friends, big stories to break down today. I'll be going through the predicted lineup for our game against Crystal Palace. We discuss the injury news around Badiashile, Ian Maatsen updates, and is poor Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart at fault for how the season's gone? So we got a ton of things to break down. Hope you guys enjoy. Hit that like button, share your thoughts and opinions, and without wasting any more time. So let's get the bad news out of the way first. And Badiashile has been ruled out for the game tonight. And on top of that, he's ruled out now for the next month. So you will miss the cup final against Liverpool, and it's just bad news for Badiashile. So does this mean that maybe Thiago Silva might start tonight? We don't know right now because Levi Colwill is now back, but he will be assessed in time for the game tonight. But in my opinion, I'd be very surprised if Thiago Silva started over Levi Colwill. Later on, I'm going to go through my predicted lineup, so stay tuned for that. But I want to say quickly, I do feel for Badiashile. Listen, I think he's one of the best young talents at his age in Europe. We can't forget that. But that doesn't mean that his game is necessarily perfect just yet. So we have to see him in a very realistic lens. I think the most important thing that we can't forget though is that he's been disrupted throughout the season because of injuries. He missed preseason, which is the key part for any player to have a top high performance level season. And he's getting these little small knocks and injuries as the season's going on. So I think right now we just have to be patient with him. He doesn't need any unrealistic expectations placed on him. We have a great defender for the future, and hopefully he can come back fitter and stronger, because I definitely believe in this guy's quality in the long term. So that's the Badiashile news out of the way. And now this takes us on to the predicted lineup part for the video. And I have to say, I found this very hard to kind of guess what lineup we would use. Now, logic would dictate that we would use the exact same lineup that we used against Aston Villa. But on the other hand, some players are out the team due to injury. Some players are returning back. Pochettino has a large selection of fresh available players to use. And tonight we're playing against a very weakened Crystal Palace that are losing Olise, Eze, plus many other players in their team. Does Pochettino decide to go for an offensive attacking lineup consisting of a 4-2-3-1 to kind of shoehorn in as much offensive talent as possible? Or do we maintain the principles that we use against Aston Villa? But if we did that, there could be some consequences. So I'm showing you guys my lineup, but I have to admit that I'm not even fully agreeing with that, because ideally I've been thinking, how could I put in Palmer and Nkunku and all these guys together? I also think too, we've seen throughout the season that Pochettino will only use Gallagher, Enzo and Caicedo together. Are all three needed against Palace? I don't know, but at the same time, can you disrespect the system? I'm not sure either. I think for me, what made things really difficult is, how do you introduce Nkunku? Now, on one hand, could Poch decide, listen, I'm thinking about the cup final game against Liverpool. I want Nkunku there fit and fresh. I'm not going to just overstretch him right now. But on the other hand, he has to build up his minutes in time for the final, right? And if he's building up his minutes, he has to be building up his understanding in the system and with his teammates, right? So it's if Nkunku is put back in the team, you're either taking out either one of Palmer maybe, or Conor Gallagher. But on the other hand, because Palace are quite weak, maybe you're going to have Palmer on the right hand side, Nkunku up front, Nico on the left, keep the same midfield three, and in defence, Ben, Colwill, Disasi, Gusto, and Petrovic in goal. Now, I'll be curious to see how we line up offensively, only because of this one key thing against Aston Villa. But for me, when you use a false nine, ideally you need to have pacey ball carriers either side, because if you're creating the spaces right between the defender and the fullback, you need those guys with pace that can cut through into them spaces right with those diagonal runs. And most importantly, you need one of those guys that can carry you up the field with their runs. And I think Madueke, it's not a surprise that his dribbling stats in the few appearances he's making right now are some of the team's highest stats right now. And against Villa, his role was even more prominent. The space has been made on the right hand side. Noni carrying us up the field. The link up with Gusto. I do feel like Noni might get sacrificed, of course, to use Palmer, because you're thinking, okay, with City and Cole coming up, maybe I want to get these guys playing together a bit more. But at the same time, Palmer's more of a playmaker style player, right? So I think there'll be a big focus on Malo Gusto to have to support the width on the right hand side. I think this lineup is very offensive, but I do think that Nkunku now has to be introduced and he has to start building the understanding with his teammates. And I think obviously Cole Palmer is one of our most informed players. I think Nico was so good against Villa on the left hand side that I'm not putting Sterling or Mudryk there for now. The midfield remains the same because the way they cooked Enzo as the 8. For me, Enzo is the future as an 8. I don't want to see this guy playing some deep line playmaker role or some regista this or whatever. Listen, as long as he can receive first phase, build up second phase and get on the end of attacks, this role encapsulates his best qualities. And I think obviously the key thing to really make this all work is if Poch uses Colwell over Thiago Silva. Because if Thiago Silva plays, we just can't play as compactly. We can't push our lines up as high, and I think you need to do that because, you know, if your fullbacks are going to get forward, they need to feel the confidence that they'll be covered in behind by their centre backs. So this is the lineup I'm going for. Share your thoughts and opinions, but I do think that, listen, maybe more offensive players against a weak Palace team, getting goals, winning, that will give us the confidence that we need versus City and then Liverpool. Now let's discuss the latest reports surrounding Ian Maatsen. Bad news for all you Maatsen fans because it seems like we won't be expecting to see him return back to the club for next summer. Romano came out reporting that there is a feeling in this situation between us and Maatsen that, you know, now everything is over right now, especially with Pochettino as the manager. So, you know, Poch was discussing things about maybe players of the entourage being unhappy behind the scenes. I always kind of had this inkling, in my opinion, you know, there's no fact supporting this, that maybe this could involve Ian Maatsen. I would feel it for Maatsen because, as I said, Poch should have embraced the youth in this team for a long time. I've never agreed with using a centre back at left back. I've not seen the utility behind that. We've not become a better team for that. And the ironic thing is that with Poch's reliance on shoehorning in experience, you know, dealing and stopping teams on the counter-attack, you're inadvertently encouraging teams to counter against you even more. And with how we played against Villa, I think all of us kind of collectively saw, wow, this is clicked. Something is different here. And I'm frustrated because I kind of feel like we could have tapped into that Villa energy if Poch decided to use Ian Maatsen. So seeing this guy absolutely tearing things up for Dortmund, where Dortmund fans are now saying, listen, it's great that we have our star boy Sancho back, but for the sake of this team, Ian Maatsen is the most important player to secure for next season because there aren't many top high potential class left backs like him. He's seamlessly fitted into the team and he's upgraded our ability down that left-hand side. I mean, some of the assists that he's picked up, the driving runs, you know, the quality in the final third, I think it's such a massive shame that for whatever reason, Pochettino did not see something in Maatsen. And listen, managers don't always get things right. Let's not act like they're infallible to making mistakes. And I just think that if Poch decided to use Maatsen, as I'm really stressing, I think we would have seen this Villa performance a lot earlier on. And the team would have been more comfortable, more in sync, more compact, better offensively. And I think Poch, even though I sympathise with all of the, you know, the misfortune he's had to work with due to injuries and stuff like that, I just felt like in those key decisions where managers are needed, he was getting it wrong due to fear. And I think Maatsen was the victim of that. And we see what happens. I do think that he'll be a very popular guy this summer. Obviously, we know that City and even Barca and other clubs showed light interest in him. And Dortmund now needs to find the money to buy him because there is a 35 million release clause. We did not insert that value there for no reason because we know how good he is. And there is some talks that maybe Dortmund may struggle to afford that type of fee. And if that's the case, then imagine other clubs will come in and try and sign him and see what happens. But I'll always feel like maybe we've missed the ball mark, not giving him opportunities, especially with his age, his ability, his talents coming from the academy as well too. I mean, I've always rated Maatsen for a long time. He's had many great seasons, so, you know, what he's showing right now isn't by fluke. I think this was always destined to come. And I just think it's a massive shame that for whatever reasons, Poch has not decided to entrust in him, use him in his best position, and I'm fully okay with Maatsen moving on and fulfilling the top class potential he has. And the ironic thing is that eventually we'll probably have to end up buying another left back, but like, who are the like incredible options in the market right now that are like clear upgrades over Maatsen? Maybe Davis, Balde, I don't know, but these are also very unrealistic options that you might not be able to get. So I'll be paying the long-term price for short-term gains. I guess we're about to find out. And to end things with the final story of today, we discuss our co-sporting directors and Paul Winstanley and Lawrence Stewart. Interesting article was released by The Athletic detailing, the time at the club and kind of letting us know that the futures around both our co-directors, they're safe for now. Right now, the club aren't thinking to review them and move them on. I think it'd be very hard to do that. And I think if you were just to make a hasty decision of just sacking your sporting directors, the consequences that come from that are so big and so vast. And I think when people just blindly just spout that out, I think you're being very naive. And you're not really being, you're not thinking about how this works in reality. I'm going to be fair and objective. Listen, I've had a lot of interesting opinions around both of them. I've always been a bit surprised at why we need to have two guys at the top instead of like one man's vision. But at the same time, I'm not going to act like they haven't done good things for us. Let's keep things real. Obviously, they didn't sign your Koulibaly, Sterlings and Cucureas. That was between Bowley and Tuchel because we had no sporting directors. We didn't have that structure in place and that's got nothing to do with them. But on the other hand, do I think that their youth pro model is a massive negative that's causing us issues? I can't fully say hand on my heart that it is. Maybe it was too aggressive. Maybe it was too much in such a short amount of time. But when you're looking at players like Malo Gusto, I mean, what a talent this guy looks like. Signing Caicedo and Enzo, it doesn't matter if they've had small iffy periods. As a fan base, we feel very confident around these guys for the future. There's some top young guys that were signed as well too. So it's not all been negatives in that point. And I guess the article from The Athletic today really reflects those types of points that were being made. The article states that they believe that signing young is the right strategy because it's going to future-proof the team. It will get us ready for when, the teams at Liverpool and City get phased out, because that time will come eventually, and then they will have those periods where they need to bring that stability again. And hopefully by the time they're finding that period, we have a settled team that has more experience, that's a bit older, and that is a lot better. So I don't think the principle behind the strategy is bad whatsoever. They believe that this youth model is quite undeveloped with big clubs in the game. I'll touch upon that later on. They can be bought for less, and of course there's massive upsides if you get things right. But I think maybe the main issue we've had is that there hasn't been enough balance. And I think I see this in two areas. I think I see this in the fact that Pochettino didn't get at least a few experienced figures in the team. And he mentioned this in his pre-match press conference before the game against Crystal Palace, where it's like, listen, it's not that our team is too young. It's the fact that maybe there's an abundance of very, very young players where, listen, most of the squad guys are under 20 years old, and it's quite hard for them to be in the right mental capacity to deal with the difficult parts of a season when your main objective as a football club is to keep on winning. So maybe it's too idealistic to expect a team consisting of players mainly under 22, 23 years old to still get Champions League football just because we spent big money on them. And I think we're noticing that this season. But at the same time, I don't think it's fully on the owners. I do think Poch takes some responsibility. And as I've said, I feel like the decisions he's made during hardships have been too safe. They've been too negative. They haven't really helped address the future concerns of the team. And I feel like he's missed so many months of opportunity for us to continue that style that we showed against Aston Villa by shoehorning in experience for the sake of it and shoehorning in more defensive players, thinking we're going to be stronger defending counterattacks when it did the absolute opposite. And I think this is the main reason as to why we find ourselves in mid-table. So I think Port should definitely have done a lot better with the players at his disposal. I've been a bit disappointed with that. Hopefully now we're starting to see that pastures have turned new and there's new life to come now before the season ends. But going back to the sporting directors, did we have to sign all the young players? We did too. What does this say about the academy where, there's more emphasis on buying young talents elsewhere instead of encouraging and using the talents that we already have? And, obviously they must rate these talents if they want to put them on the market for 40 million, 50 million, 35 million. They're not leaving for 5 million, 10 million a piece. They're leaving for big money. And big clubs across Europe are looking at our players, and you just think to yourself, money could have been saved if maybe a handful of guys were kept and used instead of maybe turning to the market to sign other players where they might not have a long shelf life over the next season or two in the future. And obviously there are some risks that come when you put all your eggs in this youth basket. I think number one, if you're doing that, it must mean that you have supreme confidence behind your ability to develop these guys, and by developing them, they need to get the minutes. They have to play in the right system that encourages their best traits, and you need to have patience to let them iron out their mistakes, because we didn't sign like, 10 Mbappe level youth players, right? And because those guys don't really exist in the market. And I guess my final observation and thought, and I'm curious to read what you guys think about this one, because I want you to share your thoughts and opinions. But obviously I understand the merits behind this data approach, but then I think to myself, what are the main benefits that clubs of our size really get from this data analysis approach? Because in my opinion, if you're a smaller club, let's say a Brighton, where you don't have the access to resources, it makes more sense for you to have a data model which can help you unearth Prem level talents that have the potential to be better than what they are, because you have the environment where you can afford to use like Belgium's best star and use them straight in your first team. You can use Ecuador's best star, you can use stars from smaller leagues, and you have the facilities and environments to actually integrate them and benefit from them now. But us on the other hand, let's say our data unearths a super talent from flipping Sweden or something like that. That doesn't necessarily mean that he is good enough to go straight into the first team to play a key role. So it's just like, if you think about it on that perspective, realistically, the talent pool of players a club like us can really turn to are going to be infinitely smaller compared to a club of Brighton size. And if you have tons of scouts like clubs like us have, how much data do you need to support signing guys like Malo Gusto or Enzo's or Caicedo's or players like that, right? I don't think you need that much. So I think there has to be a better use of how we apply data. I think the main benefit would probably be if we have a club network model where we can afford to sign these types of guys that Brighton's and Co's would naturally sign, because we're then going to move them onto clubs under our network. But as your ambitions rise up the table, if you're looking to get Champions League football or win the league, right, there is a case of diminishing returns compared to a club like a Brighton who, listen, if they get European football, that is a massive success for them. That supports everything they're doing. That's going to bring in more money. That's going to mean a lot more for them compared to a club like us, where that is just the standard that we need to keep maintaining, of course, to hopefully continue the growth for the future. We need a better quality of player that, is more ready now for this level, that obviously has some upside compared to a Brighton that can afford to wait 2-3 years and keep that conveyor belt rolling, because their main ambitions will just be to get into Europe, and that's that. So I do believe that there could have been a better balance found between the owner's, strategy, the manager's needs, and the concerns of the first team. And I don't think we'd have had to have suffered this much like we're doing this season. I do think that responsibility is shared. I think this is why you can't fully just blame Portugal, the owners, or anyone. I think it's the whole club have to take accountability. But hopefully things do get better. We're stuck in it right now. It's not like we can change things up. Drastic changes won't bring drastic results. I think we need to kind of understand and realize that by now. And as I said, I think Villa, there was a blueprint that was shown in that game. And I hope it's encouraged, developed, and improved upon now, because I feel like this was the whole point of why we signed many of these players, to continue playing that style of football that we showed against Villa. So my friends, that's the news video today. Share your thoughts and opinions. I'm EFC, this is BlueLionsTV. See you guys later tonight for the match review. Cool.